Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce, bringing timely economic discussion to the region for nearly 40 years. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors, Bank of America, Martins Point Healthcare, and Central Maine Power. Cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Pretty Flaherty. Community corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Tomorrow's leaders and entrepreneurs sponsors, AAA Northern New England and ProSearch. Coffee sponsor, Skowhegan Savings. Parking sponsor, Vitalius Real Estate Group. Media partners, radio sponsor, WGAN. Print sponsor, The Forecaster. TV sponsor, WMTW Maine CW. Business news sponsor, Maine Biz. With production support provided by Headlight. Venue partner, Holiday Inn by the Bay. And thank you to our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, MEMIC, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, Southern Maine Community College, and the University of Southern Maine. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President, Britt Vitalius.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the October 6th, 2022 Eggs and Issues, the monthly business breakfast series brought to you by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. My name is Britt Vitalius. I'm the owner of Vitalius Real Estate Group, a real estate brokerage right here in Portland, and I'm honored to serve as the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank all of you for joining us this month for our second installment of our 37th season of Eggs and Issues. After 2.5 years of modified, virtual, and hybrid events, we are so happy to be back at the Holiday Inn by the Bay in person with all of you. Today's presentation will be a debate between the Republican and Democratic candidates for governor, former Governor Paul LePage and incumbent Governor Janet Mills. Before I invite the candidates Mills and LePage to the stage, I want to take a moment to again recognize each of our sponsors of Eggs and Issues who make this event possible. First and foremost, our presenting sponsors, Bank of America, Martins Point Healthcare, and we are also very happy to announce that these longtime partners have been joined by our newest presenting sponsor, Central Maine Power. Please welcome to the team, and thank you so much for your support of this program. It's really critical for us to be able to put this on for you. I also want to thank our other generous sponsors. Our cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Our reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Pretty Flaherty. Community Corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Today's Community Corner is Chance to Advance, a local organization that elevates the voice of immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers through their photos and their stories. They believe that when experiences are shared, we become a more inclusive, connected, and educated world. To learn more about Chance to Advance, visit their website, chancetoadvanceme.org. And while there, purchase tickets to their upcoming calendar release party on November 9th at USM. Their 2023 calendars are now available to pre-order online. They ship in November, and all proceeds benefit the Chance to Advance Refugee Student Scholarship Program. Tomorrow's leaders and entrepreneurs sponsor, AAA Northern New England and ProSearch. Through this program, the Chamber is able to offer students in the region, both high school and college level, an invitation to attend Eggs and Issues at no cost. I believe we have students here today from Thornton Academy, Waynfleet, Falmouth, and Gorham High Schools, as well as USM and SMCC. If so, please stand and be recognized. I would say this is my favorite part. Thank you so much for coming. And from the business community, please go up to any of these young folks after, say hi, introduce yourself. It's just so great. You're out, the interest in our community, the business community, and politics and the future of Maine. So thank you all for coming. Our coffee sponsor is Skowhegan Savings. They make a good cup of coffee. Our parking sponsor, Vitalis Real Estate Group. You may have noticed me outside valet parking cars earlier. A special thanks to our media partners, The Forecaster, WGAN, MTW, Maine CW, and Maine Biz. Our FM for More Information sponsor is the Portland Public Library, and production support is provided by Headlight Audiovisual, and our venue is the Holiday Inn by the Bay. And a very special thank you to our special community partners who support all of the Chamber initiatives: Spectrum Healthcare Partners, University of Southern Maine Community College, and MEMIC. Let's have another round of applause for all of our generous sponsors. Before we launch into our presentation, I'd like to remind everyone that as we approach Election Day, there are several crucial local issues up for vote on the ballot, particularly here in Portland. At last month's EGGS event, we had a panel discussion about the referendum questions and their impact, should they pass, on the city and those who live here. We need to ensure that all Portland voters understand what is at stake in this election cycle. Together, the Chamber is partnering with the Enough is Enough campaign to help spread more information about the issues and why it is in the best interest of our community to vote no this November. No on 13 ballot referendum questions. No on 113 pages. Please get engaged, educate yourself, volunteer. If you're interested in volunteering and helping our canvassing efforts, please contact Eamon Dundon, from the Portland Regional Chamber. If you're unable to volunteer, we are giving away free lawn signs and door hangers at our offices at 93 Exchange Street, Monday through Friday, 10 to 4. Stop in. We'd love to see you. And stop by and grab some signs today. To stay appraised of the future updates, we encourage everyone to sign up for the Chamber's Advocacy and Events newsletter by scanning the QR codes found at your table. We also encourage everyone to check out the variety of resources and presentations that we house at our YouTube page. The recordings of last month's Exit Issues is now available and would be a good resource if you know of any undecided voters out there. This is fair game. So it was a great discussion last month. We had a great turnout. It wasn't quite this many people, but it was great. We had 6 people up on stage really getting into the issues. There's so much, it's hard to distill them down on any one point. You could go so deep. But it's a great overview of the issue from some of the experts in the field and our community. And I encourage people to seek that out, educate yourself, and get the information. So we're going to be live streaming this debate. So I'm stalling for time for another couple seconds. But I think if we take our time bringing them up on stage, we're going to do just fine. So now on to today's debate. Maine's gubernatorial race is hugely significant for the future of our state and its people. The race is being watched nationally and features 2 people well known to Mainers. We are so grateful to have both Democratic and Republican candidates here with us today to share their views on a variety of issues in front of local voters. Please join me in welcoming all parties to the stage: incumbent Governor Janet Mills, former Governor Paul LePage, and the moderator of today's event, our very own President and CEO of the Portland Regional Chamber, Quincy Hensel.
Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Portland Community Chamber's 2022 gubernatorial debate. My name's Quincy Hensel. I am the CEO of the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, and it is my honor to moderate today's discussion. We are incredibly happy to see this crowd. This is clearly the largest crowd we've had in about 2.5 years. Definitely reflective of the importance of this election. We also have, as Britt had mentioned, a good deal of students that have joined us this morning. So thank you for being here. You're always an amazing addition to any and all of our events. As Britt mentioned, we are streaming this debate live on WGAN. They have been a solid and a steadfast partner of our Eggs and Issues program for many years. So I want to thank all of those who are not here in person, but are tuning in. So with that, I would like to introduce the candidates. To my right, we have the Democratic nominee, Governor Janet Mills, who is seeking her second term as governor. She first entered public service as an assistant attorney general, has served in the Maine House of Representatives, and was elected district attorney for Androscoggin, Franklin, and Oxford counties. And prior to serving as governor, served in the role of Attorney General of Maine. Governor Mills is also the first female governor of our great state. And we have the Republican nominee, former Governor Paul LePage, who has also held the position of governor, elected first in 2010 and then to a second term in 2014. Prior to serving as governor, he served as mayor of Waterville. His career before holding public office included working for Chrysler, then in leadership for lumber and paper mills, and immediately prior to his public service, he served as the general manager for Martin's. Please join me in welcoming the candidates. Now, the format for today's debate will be as follows. Each candidate will be allowed a 1-minute opening statement. I will then pose a series of questions, and they will each have 2 minutes to respond. The candidate who answers first will be allowed a 1-minute rebuttal, and then we will move on to the next topic. And to close, you'll each be allowed a 1-minute closing statement. We do have a clock that is ticking down in front of us to keep us on track. We'll hold firm to the time allotments established, as we do have limited time for today's discussion. Today's questions are reflective of and in alignment with the Portland Regional Chamber's policy priorities and are incredibly pertinent to our region and our economy. So with that, let's begin with opening statements. We will go in alphabetical order. Governor LePage, you get to go first, and we will put 1 minute on the clock.
Thank you. Today, Maine's in real trouble. We are in a recession, and Janet Mills' record is disastrous. Record number of deaths in the past, children deaths in the last 2 years, record number of overdose deaths. I bring an entirely different perspective to governing. I was born in Lewiston, a very poor and dysfunctional domestic violence family. I spent 2 years on the streets. I made it out of Lewiston into college, successful business, and as eventually the Blaine House. Today, Portland is a concrete jungle. Deering Park is not safe for you to bring your children. It actually took a press conference in order to clean up the park for 1 day. Should I visit every day? I have the skill sets necessary to move Maine forward.
Thank you. Governor Mills.
Thank you. Listen, when I first took office, I asked Heather Johnson, my commissioner of DECD, to go around the state and collect ideas for economic development. And for the first time in at least a decade, we prepared a 10-year economic development strategy, and that's what we're following today. Thanks to that plan, we were ready to do an economic recovery plan when the pandemic hit, and we've implemented that. And now, with the help of federal funds, we are investing in our small businesses and small farmers and forestry and fishermen, those industries which need our help. We're investing in research and development, expanding apprenticeships, promoting skills and credentials, and free community college, delivering those things to address our workforce shortage. More importantly, and we got some good news this week that I'll be happy to talk about later, but more importantly, we have challenges, but I want to listen, I want to work across the aisle, and I want to deliver stability, consistency, and reliability for the Maine people.
Thank you. Let's start our first round of questions with the riveting topic of labor regulations. One of the hardest challenges businesses in our region face is the patchwork of local labor regulations that vary from town to town and create a very unpredictable business environment. Should you be elected to another term as governor, do you see a role for the statewide preemption of local wage and hour laws, or is it appropriate for municipalities to adopt their own? And I will start with Governor LePage with 2 minutes on the clock.
I actually believe that we should have a statewide rate of pay. I think I see a referendum now for $18. That's inflationary, and we should be paying people for productivity, not just because they're breathing. And that's my position about minimum wage. Minimum wage was never intended to be a living wage. It was supposed to get a starting wage and get you into the workforce. I truly believe that what we need to do is spend more time educating and working and making sure that our people have trades, professions, and that they can grow into productivity and become providers to our society. When I took over in 2011, we had work rules. We put work rules in. And at that time, when I left in 2019, we had 65% workforce participation. 4 years later, we've taken away work rules, and now we're down to 58.8%, below the national average. And once tied with New Hampshire, now we're significantly behind New Hampshire. We need to get our folks back to work. If you're able-bodied, you need to go to work. We need to provide the training so that you can succeed in a profession, in a career path. It's not enough to just say, we'll pay you $18, $20, $25. That gets us nowheres. You only succeed through education, through training, and to have a skill set.
Governor Mills.
Thank you. Listen, on regulations broadly, I think the state, we need to have consistent, sensible regulatory frameworks. The state sets the floor, but make sure that they're not overly burdensome to individuals and something that protects the interests of employers and employees fairly and sensibly. We want to increase the workforce. We are working across the aisle to increase the workforce. We are providing free community college, 2 years free community college to recent high school grads. We've expanded apprenticeship programs, paid apprenticeship programs, and a career exploration program for high school students. More importantly, I think what you're talking about is the referendum process, which usually reflects, lack of success at the legislative level. I know under my predecessor there were a number of people's vetoes and referenda reflecting the failure of government to respond to the needs of the people. I don't want that to happen as a regular matter. It reflects a frustration and a lack of democracy. So what I've done is to work across the aisle, to enact bipartisan budgets, to do things for the people, like enacting the most effective inflation relief program in the United States and the most generous student loan forgiveness program in the United States by working across the aisle. So to minimize the impact of referenda, which is the people's right, we need to work at the local level and the state level to enact policies that are fair and balanced and that are supported by the people. The problem with referenda, of course, as you know, is that they're written outside in a non-transparent manner. They don't involve public input, and I want to make sure that we do as much as possible at the state level to reflect the will of the people in the legislative democratic process.
Thank you. Governor LePage, a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that the referendum system in the state of Maine is broken. We've tried to fix it for 8 years when I was there. I believe that we should move the referendum process from 10% of a gubernatorial election to 15%, and to have it by county, by Senate district. Each Senate district has to get 15% of the people to sign the petition, so we have a cross-section of the entire state in people's referendum. Right now, you can come down to Portland and get it done out of Portland, and frankly, that's fine, but many of the people in the states are just disenfranchised by what's happening. You go to your population base, you get your signatures, you move on. I think we have to do it statewide. I think we need to change the referendum process. We're a cheap date, and it's just too easy to get to govern by referendum instead of governing through the legislature.
Thank you. Next question, Governor Mills, we will start with you, and we're going to turn our attention to housing, which is probably currently the biggest issue that is facing our members. And I know it's not just Greater Portland, but this is really something that's happening across the state. This year, the legislature passed and you, Governor Mills, signed LD 2003, which is a law that addresses zoning issues from a statewide level. We supported the bill, along with groups from across the political spectrum, but we know it's not all we can be doing as a state to address the chronic shortage of workforce housing. What do each of you view as the most effective levers that can be pulled at the state level to lower the cost of housing by increasing housing production?
Thanks, and I want to recognize, first of all, Greg Payne in the audience here today. He's my senior housing advisor, has held that position for a while now, and he's sort of my eyes and ears on all things housing. We've done a lot to work with the cities and towns locally for a long time now, and not only passing LD 2003 and LD 201, but incorporating in our main jobs and recovery plan substantial funding for new housing. And frankly, right off the bat, I recognized housing as an issue by issuing the $15 million senior housing bond that had sat on my predecessor's desk for more than 2 years. I have visited the seniors living in those apartments and residences who are comfortable and happy to be there. It's affordable senior housing. When they move into those units, that frees up housing in the community for others to take on. Now, I've traveled around the state and learned about different avenues, different approaches to housing, and it's kind of exciting to see the creative ways some communities are responding to workforce housing needs. But we just put $23 million, the legislature and I, into emergency housing, plus $750,000 into wraparound funding, so-called, to help people address homelessness. We put $50 million of that federal money, one-time federal money, into housing needs. $20 million of that has gone out the door, particularly for rural rental housing, and the rest for workforce and affordable housing. We also reenacted the historic rehabilitation tax credit, which is extremely important. That means you take existing buildings that are abandoned or vacated and redo them, transform them into housing that not only provides workforce and affordable housing, but reduces the effect of sprawl. So we've done a lot, got a lot more to do, and I appreciate Ryan Fecto, the Speaker of the House, and all of his great efforts and the commission that resulted in that legislation you spoke about.
Thank you. Governor LePage.
Well, the state of Maine clearly has a housing shortage, but it's an affordable housing shortage. It's not necessarily housing as per se. I've seen a lot of very expensive houses, but we do not have affordable housing. The problem with the bonds that the governor talks about is that bond did not address affordability. You had legislators coming in and wanted free money so they could go in and build affordable housing, and then they convert it to market rates, and people can't afford it. We need affordable housing. This is one of my plans. We have 260,000 seats in our public schools. We have 130,000 kids. We need to take a hard look at our schools. We have too many bricks and mortar. Let's take some of those schools, consolidate them, and then turn around and take the buildings that are available, retrofit them like we did the Gilman Street High School in Waterville. We put 30 apartments in there. We can do that. It's affordable. We can keep our old architecture. We can convert them to a reuse, to affordable housing. But it has to have an affordable element into the housing. You have to tie it to income of some sort, whether it's people on fixed income or people on public assistance or people in the general marketplace. You can't be charging 50 and 60% of someone's income for a living space. You have to tie it to an affordability. And so 2003, LD 2003, I'm not sure is the answer for Maine. I think it's going to go into communities and destroy them. I think we can do better. I think it's a good start, but let's take a look at it. Let's take a hard look at it and have more input from the community. And when I say the community, I mean the state communities, rural and urban. We have to do both.
Thank you. Governor Mills, would you like a
Thank
1
you.
minute rebuttal?
Let me say LD 2003, sponsored by Speaker Ryan Fecto, was the result of a group of people doing exactly that, looking at communities, talking to communities, bringing people from around the state together and saying, how can we address the housing issue? Workforce housing was the question. We are addressing workforce housing. It's a slow process. You don't build buildings overnight. Let me go back to the senior housing bond, though. That was for affordable senior housing. I'm not sure why it sat on the desk of my predecessor for more than 2 years, but I have visited the many people living in those 200 new units built with the help of that bond, and another 100 units of senior housing, affordable senior housing, that are now weatherized. So I have visited with the people living in those units, and they are happy there that it is affordable housing, affordable to them, and comfortable. And I'm very pleased that we finally got that money out the door and did right by our seniors.
Thank you. Let's now move on to taxes. Governor LePage, in the past you have repeatedly called for the eventual repeal of the income tax in Maine. Governor Mills, you pledged in your last campaign that you would not raise taxes as governor, and so far you've stuck to that pledge. Assuming we continue down this path of either cutting or not increasing taxes over the next 4 years, if Maine were to find ourselves in a recession, which programs or services would be the first to get cut under your administration? And we will start with Governor LePage.
Well, if we're heading into a recession, then all of Uncle Joe's money that came to Maine that created these jobs, if we didn't need them before, they need to go away, period. They just need to go away. We're not in the business of growing government. I took over in 2011, 14,400 employees. I left at 11,900. We were not getting any pushback anywheres, with the exception when the pandemic came in 14 months later, the governor blamed me for not having public health nurses. Well, let me tell you, at the time, we were working on revising that whole department, because what was happening is they were supposed to make 25 visits a week, and they were making 5, and in some cases, 1 or 2 visits a week. And so we just had no oversight, and we had to restructure it. So it was in the process of being done. As far as taxes, yes, I believe we need to phase out the income tax. I'm a firm believer and that we need to phase it out. We are the 9th highest tax state in America. We lose thousands and thousands of our more affluent people that have built their careers, their businesses. The intellectual foundation of our state goes to other states. They bring their capital, and within a year or two, they bring their families with them. I have a wife whose family's mostly moved to Florida. My chief of staff's siblings are all moved to Florida because the parents left. We need to keep the parents here. We need to keep the kids here. We need to make sure they can afford to be here. And I'm truly a big believer that the worst tax is the income tax, because you have no choice. Sales tax, you make a choice. Property tax, you make a choice. And we can do all of the above and reduce it, and despite the fact that my opponent did raise taxes.
Thank you. Governor Mills.
Thank you. Listen, a couple of interesting things happened just yesterday. A couple of very important, impartial economic forecasts and reports that show that Maine has the reserves to withstand a recession for the next at least 15 months. We have quadrupled the rainy day fund in Maine. Despite some having said a few months ago that I had drained the rainy day fund, we have quadrupled it. It's the highest it's ever been. That provides a reserve for Maine state government to be able to meet its expectations and serve the people of Maine. The other thing is, the other report that came out yesterday that I was very pleased with is that it projects, for the first time in 20 years, Maine has the funds to pay its bills and keep on top of its bills. Revenues and expenses are aligned. That's pretty good governing, I think. It's good management. So I don't think there's a need to go into raising any taxes whatsoever, and I have said I am opposed to raising taxes. This session of the legislature, we decreased the income tax by raising the pension exemption for retirees across the board, and by reducing the property taxes on people, by fully funding the state's share of education for the first time in history to the tune of 55%, and fully funding revenue sharing. Thank God we did that, to bring down the burden of property taxpayers. When it comes to the CDC, my record stands. Thank God we had that first year under our belt to rebuild the CDC and rehire all the public health nurses that were laid off under my predecessor's administration. Thank God we got to do that before the pandemic hit us. We had the reserves, we had the people power to fight back against this pandemic, and our record on that is pretty solid too, compared to almost every other state in the country.
Thank you. Governor LePage, 1 minute rebuttal.
When I left in 2019, I left the governor with $1.6 billion in the bank, $276 million rainy day fund, nearly $400 million, over $300 million in the liquor reserve fund, and by October, on 1st of November that year, it was gone. When I took over in 10, we had a structural gap of $1.3 billion, and we had a $750 million off-balance sheet debt to our hospitals. We took care of that, and then I built it to a very profitable place. This governor has been very, very fortunate that COVID came, because with COVID came $15 billion, or nearly $15 billion from Uncle Joe, and that's where the surplus comes from. That's where a lot of the money comes from. That's why you got $850 rebate, so she's trying to buy the election. What she should have done is lower the income tax.
Thank you, Governor. Let's turn our attention to economic development, and specifically barriers to economic development in our region and across the state. From an affordable housing project shot down in Cape Elizabeth due to opposition from residents, to the New England Clean Energy Connect project being severely slowed, if not stopped by the voters last year, Maine is struggling to enable big projects needed for the future due to pervasive NIMBYism and opposition to change. Do you think this trend is harming economic growth in Maine? And if so, how would you seek to confront it as governor? I will start with Governor Mills.
Thank you. We've seen this, what you're describing as NIMBYism, reflected in state and local reactions to various projects. As you mentioned, from housing to the NECEC corridor to many other things. But, you know, I think that look, I grew up in the foothills of Western Maine, one of the most beautiful places in the state of Maine. I love Maine like all of you do, and I recognize that it's a special place. When people grow up here, when they move here, they find special things in their community, and they hesitate to accept change. It sometimes takes a lot to overcome that emotional barrier to accepting change. But in working to do that, we can't be the state, we can't be the communities that always say no to things. We've got to make sure people have an open mind, that we welcome new people, that we tell them how safe we are, that we want them to be here. And we want new businesses and new investments to be here. That's why there are so many new startups in the state of Maine right now. That's why people are moving here. That's why we have the 7th highest in-migration rate in the country. We've always complained about the brain drain, but we're reversing that now. People are coming here, young people with families, and we welcome them. They have new startups, whether it's technology issues, nanocellulose inventions and products and research, but diversifying our economy with new people and new faces and bringing people back to Maine, the boomerang folks as we call them. I think we can do this, and I think we can make people feel welcome and make new businesses and investments feel welcome by starting at the local level, talking it through with people, and making sure they don't feel threatened by some particular change, whether it's housing or a new investment or a new company in their community.
Thank you. Governor LePage.
Well, one of the major problems we have in the state, and it was a problem when I was governor, and it's a problem continuing on, it's even gotten worse, is when agencies cannot find a way to get to yes. They always have a no in their mind. They're adversarial to business. My opponent, the very first day, went down to southern Maine and took a sign down that said open for business and took it down. That doesn't send a very strong and warm message. This week, there was a report out, a study just came out, that the national average for business starts per 1,000 people is 16 companies per 1,000 residents in the state. The state of Maine is at 9. We're well below the recovery from the pandemic. When I was governor, we had 5 account execs, and their job was when somebody called and inquired about starting a business, we assigned them one of the account execs, and their job was to get them through the maze of permits and taxes and licenses, and we told them what areas to go through, and they were running around getting that done. I remember Carbonite, who had a facility in England, came to see us on April 2nd of one year, I forget which year, and by the 29th of April, they had their license and their permits for Lewiston, for a facility in Lewiston. That's pro-business. That's someone that wants to sit there and make sure that when they knock on the door, you open the door and your briefcase is ready to go, and help them through the maze. And we have to make sure that our agencies are helping people. Last night, we were here in Portland talking about lobster. The lobster industry is under attack. The governor should be leading the charge, not being an intervener, but leading the charge.
Thank you. Governor Mills,
Thanks.
rebuttal.
Just on the last point, the reason Noah was here last night to hear from the fishermen is because I told them, get up here and listen to the fishermen, and they did. When it comes to jobs, we are seeing job growth, wage growth, business growth in the state of Maine. Under my predecessor, I think 6 paper mills, pulp and paper mills, closed in the last few years of his tenure. That hasn't happened to me, and I don't want it to happen. I'm working my tail off to make sure we don't lose jobs, don't lose businesses. Heather Johnson, one of the most competent people to ever lead the Economic and Community Development Commission Department, is out there beating the bushes. What I won't do is invite a business here, curry favor with them, and then months later pull the rug out from under them, as my predecessor did with Statoil, losing $200 million investment, sending it overseas to Norway and Scotland. I won't do that.
But they went
Thank you.
bankrupt.
Thank you
No,
both.
he didn't.
Next question.
Sorry.
All right, we're going to start the next question with Governor LePage. We're going to talk about workforce development and some barriers we face to workforce development. Before and throughout the pandemic, we have consistently heard from our members that the lack of safe and affordable childcare is one of the largest barriers they have to hiring and retaining employees. What do you see as the state's role in supporting and expanding the childcare industry while lowering costs for parents? Governor LePage.
Before I go there, I just got to respond to the 6 mills that are gone. The 6 mills that are gone, the 20 mills, I should say, the 20 mills, paper mills that are gone are due to bad public policy. In the last 6 years of my administration, the policy was directed from the legislature, and a governor can only be as strong as the support he gets from the legislature. And as far as childcare, I think this governor, during the pandemic, put 18 pages of additional regulations that absolutely destroyed the childcare system in the state of Maine. And how do we bring it back? Well, the first thing I want to do is from K through 8, we're going to have after-school care. Make sure that we have after-school care. And how do we start it out? We go out and get child care people that are out of business, bring them back in and help them get their businesses going again so that they can go and take care of child care from birth till preschool. And then keep our K through 8 system of after-school care till 5:30 in the afternoon. And where do you get the people for that? You hire moms, stay-at-home moms that have kids in school to come in at 2 o'clock and stay till 5 o'clock with their children and help take care of the other kids. Bring grandmothers in. But you got to pay them. It's not a stipend. And the other thing that I think is really important to do in the next couple of years, in particular in the next couple of years, because of what happened with the pandemic, is pay teachers stipends. After the school day is over at 2 o'clock, pay them a stipend the way we pay coaches to tutor our kids that fell behind the last 2 years. We need to have our kids catch up, and we're falling behind, and I think we can do a great job using teachers, parents, and grandparents.
Thank you. Governor Mills.
I would invite my predecessor to approach the Children's Cabinet with those kinds of ideas, see what they think about them. The Children's Cabinet had not met in 8 years prior to my taking office. It has met regularly since then and come up with some great ideas. And even during the pandemic, we were looking at childcare, dealing with childcare issues, because we want people to be back in the workforce, but we want them to have the knowledge, the comfort, that to understand that their children are being cared for during the day or during the work hours with safety and with a good learning, a healthy learning environment. So we've done a couple of things. We've appropriated $25 million through the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan to help renovate, expand, and build new child care facilities. So building new slots is important. A lot of places just don't have room for more kids, more capacity. So that's the first thing. Then adding stipends to pay people an incentive to stay on the job and help take care of kids. We've paid $200 monthly stipends to about 7,000 child care workers. And then we have the first ever child care plan for Maine, which was informed by the views of teachers and students and parents and families, and improves the child care quality and accessibility and affordability over the long term. And finally, we put $5.4 million in public pre-K programs across the state and $7 million in grant funding, resulting in 90 new pre-K classrooms. I should add also, training early childhood educators is also important, and that's why we've expanded the early childhood education programs in the CTEs and in the Maine Community College system in particular. More people are being trained up. You don't just hire somebody off the streets to take care of children and to educate them at an early age. You hire, hopefully, trained people, you pay them a decent wage, and you respect their profession.
Thank you. Governor LePage, rebuttal.
You know, what I'm hearing right here today, as I've heard in the first debate and I've been hearing and reading in newspapers for months, is money, money, money. We're handing out money every day. We're giving everybody money. Thanks to Uncle Joe for all this money, but what happens when the money runs out? We need real ideas, not just handing out money, throwing money here and there. We need to make sure that our kids are protected and well cared for. The one thing that I really care about, talk is cheap, is really cheap, and money covers a lot of sins. But the last 2 years, we have lost more children at the hands of perpetrators, family members, whether they're at the ward of the state or from a parent, and we have to stop it. We have to stop it. And how do we stop it? We get engaged with the professionals in our schools, and I believe that parents are part of the solution, grandparents are part of the solution. I think child protection should come out of DHHS and have a standalone agency.
Thank you. Let's move on now to transportation. Public transportation is one of our top 3 policy priorities at the Portland Regional Chamber. Now, while it's limited in large parts of Maine due to geography, in our region, it's a key element to moving residents and visitors alike around to essential services, work, school, and attractions. Unfortunately, in Maine, our public transportation agencies receive far less support from the Department of Transportation than other states, and that means public transportation options are not as frequent and reliable as they need to be. Do you support additional state subsidies for public transportation services? And I will start with Governor Mills.
Thank you. Look, public transportation, yes, and I just signed a financial order last week to invest more money into the small public transportation units. We just christened about 4 new buses in Portland and Saco about a month or so ago. They're hybrid buses that will save money for those cities. We've made an unprecedented $185 million investment, additional state funding for transportation this year. Yes, it's money. Yes, money does pay for these contracts. Money pays the workers. Money pays the contractors. And we have done this without bonding, without borrowing. This year alone, from the surplus, the cascade from the budget, and from general fund appropriations, we've invested more money in transportation than probably any previous year in the last 20 years. So the pandemic has driven prices up for fuel and for construction costs and for repaving and whatnot. The supply chain issues affect those jobs as well. But look, we're a big and rural state. When I was a kid growing up, we had the blue line that went from Farmington to Waterville, Farmington to Lewiston, and to Portland. We don't have the blue line anymore. I've been talking about to Lewis and Auburn area people to develop a better busing system and to talk about rail. We're talking to the Bangor area folks about rail and different modes of transportation to allow people to get from one place to another. There's also the issue of broadband, which ultimately says you can work from home easier, you can access telehealth and teleeducation easier and cheaper than commuting to work every day. So we're trying to be creative when it comes to public transportation and the public needs for access and communication.
Thank you. Governor LePage.
Transportation. Let me start with broadband because the governor just finished on that. Absolutely. Broadband should be invested in, and we have two organizations now, not one, we have two organizations that have all this money for rural broadband, but it's not getting into the rural areas. I've been speaking to towns, I've been speaking to companies, and really what we need to do is take all 16 counties, and we have to have a loop of broadband that's solid and high speed. And then we have to link them together like a chain link so that broadband doesn't fall down when we have an area that has a maintenance issue. We absolutely need to do it, but I will caution people. If you study what's going around the country, the public, community-owned get very political, and they haven't shown to work. It needs to be owned by private industry. As we go to public transportation, Maine has a very peculiar dynamic. We have a rural state, part of it is a rural state, and then we have a part urban. The urban areas definitely need more investment, no question about it. The rural areas, I'll tell you, we studied rail. I studied rail from Canada to Old Orchard with the Canadian governments. I've studied rail from Bangor to Lewiston, from Portland to Waterville. We've studied it all. We have a problem with scaling. We don't have the populations to make it worthwhile, to make it efficient and affordable. And so that's a real issue. But in the local communities like Portland, definitely we need a robust transportation system, particularly because we have a lot of new Maine people coming in, and they are just getting started. Many of them can't even go to work yet, and they have to wait months and maybe years to go to work. We need to provide a better system here in the southern part of the state. The northern part of the state, it's a lot more difficult because of our population, the sparse population.
Thank you. Governor Mills, rebuttal.
Thanks. Just on broadband, look, with strongly bipartisan support, we established the Maine Connectivity Authority a year and a half ago, made the appointments, and then with the help of Congress and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we have been able to draw down millions of dollars for the sake of, for help in expanding broadband. We've made about 35,000 new connections, rural and urban, just in the last year or so. We're doing this. We've mapped out the entire state of Maine to know who has it, who doesn't have it, who doesn't have adequate broadband. We do have a backbone of fiber to access. Now we need the middle mile and last mile access. We're doing that in communities around the state. And I've met with so many providers and communities and people who are so excited about this development. We're doing this with collaboration with the providers and the communities. It's happening, and I commit anyone who wants to be connected to high-speed internet will have that connection within the next 24 months.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Governor LePage. Maine has many comparative advantages that have never been more visible than throughout the last 2 years of the pandemic, such as our outdoor recreation opportunities and our attraction as a remote working hotspot. We also have growing industry clusters in veterinary sciences, technology, and 21st century manufacturing, along with our traditional heritage industries that call our forests and ocean home. In what ways can we capitalize on these comparative advantages to grow our economy and set ourselves apart from other states?
Well, you're absolutely right. If you take a look at the state of Maine, our forest, our farming, and our fishing are a great basis for great growth in what I call the real Maine, north of Portland, because Portland is the urban area, and this sector is more into the veterinary and the more technical areas like the Texas Instrument and those type of manufacturing. But I will say this, we have 18 million acres of forest land. 18 million acres. We are not cutting our annual growth. That in itself is a serious problem a decade or two down the road because we'll be facing forest fires. It's something that concerns me a great deal. Why don't we have a robust forest industry? 2 reasons. Actually, you could say 3 reasons. Regulatory control, we are so slow at getting licensing and permits and working with our big industry that they get tired and they leave. Secondly, our energy costs. You cannot get your forest or your fishing industry up and running if your energy cost is so high. My opponent signed a bill called LD 99, which prevents us from investing in fossil fuel companies. Look, I agree 100% that we need to minimize the use of fossil fuel and move to clean energy. But to do it abruptly, like Janet Mills did and Joe Biden did in shutting down the pipelines and shutting down leases, and now OPEC dropping their production by 2 million barrels a day, is going to hurt. So we need to fix our energy costs. We need to make sure that our tax structure is fair and reasonable. And most of all, we have to keep our farms. We can't have solar farms. We have to have farms that grow food, grow livestock. And that's where we need to concentrate. And that's the direction I want to take the state.
Thank you.
I think the question was about how can we tap into our resources, take advantage of the idea of a tech hub and veterinary medicine and good things that are going on. A lot of things going on thanks to the Rue Institute, which I welcome to Maine, which is a huge economic driver, not just for the Portland area, the Cumberland County area, but for the state of Maine. The fact that our university, our flagship university, has become an R1 research designation is bringing jobs to Maine, bringing innovation, creative ideas to Maine. We are innovating in the forest products area. We are diversifying our agricultural and aquacultural industries. And we are investing in them with the help, yes, of federal money because they need it to recover from the pandemic. We dedicated more than $300 million in workforce investments, including $105 million for programs at Maine schools and community colleges and universities to keep up the good work in innovation and research. Jackson Labs, which is an innovator in healthcare research and veterinary research down the road, is actually not in this area, but we're not overcutting or undercutting our forests. We're responding to industry demands and to the market. That's why we're working, for instance, to diversify the forest products industry by supporting groups like Go Labs, turning our forest products into fiber-based insulation, innovative things that haven't even been done in this country before now. And so we're not shutting down any industries. We're expanding and diversifying them, and I think it's exciting. I welcome these efforts.
Thank you. Governor LePage.
Well, I spent 25 years of my career in the forest products industry, and I beg to differ that we support them. But one thing that I would like to say, for 8 years that I tried so hard to do on the coast of Maine, and last night was a good example with the Lobster Institute, the lobster meeting from NOAA. I've been trying to get the University of Maine, Machias, into a marine resource university because it's on the water. And we don't have a marine resource university on the East Coast. And I fought and fought. We gave them $8 million. We tried to get them, and it all boiled down to, and this was when Jim Page was the chancellor. We had a competent chancellor. He tried to move it. And what happened was the professors, the tenured professors, refused to move to Machias. What I say is it's not up to the professors, it's up to the state. If they want a marine resource university, then we should build it and we just hire people to work there. And if you don't want to work where the job is and you don't want to do it from home, then I'm sorry. It's time for you to go get another job, because it's about the state of Maine. It's not about tenured professors.
Thank you. Let's keep with higher education. We've touched on it.
Okay.
What steps can Maine take in higher education to ensure we are training the workforce we need to grow and sustain our economy? Please give examples of some of our needs and the challenges we face, and I will start with Governor Mills.
Thanks. First of all, I'm excited that the University of Maine is doing marine sciences and a lot of great research into the marine fisheries and marine sciences and how to diversify our aquacultural industries. We've expanded the Department of Marine Resources, given them more help to work quickly on expediting leases for diversified aquaculture measures, like scallops and oysters, for instance, and kelp. At the university and the University of Maine Machias have combined resources, as you probably know, and they have an excellent higher ed research facility on marine sciences. With respect to higher ed, look, I'm very excited to see that the Maine Community Colleges has expanded its enrollment by, I think, about 13% roughly, and that people are signing up for courses. We doubled the enrollment in the healthcare industries, nursing alone. We expanded enrollment in other healthcare occupations, phlebotomy and surgical techs and whatnot, about a dozen of them. And we've expanded our curricula in early childhood education. And we've promoted people going into the trades, which I think is vital. I've supported that as Attorney General when I invested several $100,000 into new plumbing programs at the CTEs in Western Maine, successfully starting new programs. We're doing higher ed in a more holistic way, inviting people to get certificates, not necessarily get a college degree or even a community college 2-year degree, but get a 6-month or a 3-month certificate for a trade and get out there and get back into the workforce.
Thank you. Governor LePage.
Well, I believe that the VOTEC and technical education should be started in the 7th grade. I think we got to bring it back to 7th grade. We have to give our students the opportunity and options to look at what's available out there as they move through the challenge of education. Not everybody's going to go to college, and we have a problem here in the state of Maine that we push people to go to college. We need to take a look at VOTEC, technical education. When I became governor in 2011, the one thing that I pushed at the university was credit transferability between the UMaine campuses and the community college system, and we got it done. And I agree and I applaud the efforts to get people into tech schools. I applaud the university. But I will tell you this, our university is a CRT university, and it needs to come back. We need to get out of CRT, and we need to be teaching the skills that they need to have a profession. And I am not a fan of the current chancellor. The current chancellor's contract is up. They gave him an extension. They're giving him help to get better work with people. Let me tell you, what I would do today is tell him it's time for you to go. Lee Softly was a Supreme Court justice who's the dean at the law school. I think she'd be our chancellor. I think she can get it done. I worked with her for 8 years, and she's the real deal. And so I think we need a change at the university. I think we need to work on making technical college K through 14 instead of K through 12. I think community college is a great, inexpensive way to get started in college. If you want to go beyond that, then you go to university to finish your bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. But I think the community college system is what we need to do. 60% of our colleges and universities are women, 40% are men, but the population's close to 50-50.
Thank you. Governor Mills.
Thanks.
rebuttal.
Listen, we have expanded the CTEs, as I said before, greatly expanded the scope of the curricula, the faculty, and the number of students. It's really exciting to see the growth in the CTEs and broadening the types of certificates they give, and working in partnership with private industry, private enterprise, working with the hospitals to make sure we have a feeder system for their workforce needs, working with private industry to make sure that people coming out of the higher ed, whether it's CTEs or university level or private colleges, provide a feeder system for those jobs of the present and the jobs of the future. As far as CTEs are concerned, for the first time in 28 years, my budget, my administration has funded equipment for the CTEs. You can't have a kid learning automotive and electrical without the proper equipment. And we are bringing it down into the middle school. I think that's exciting. I agree we should expose kids at a younger age to different career opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you both. Before we move into closing statements, I do want to do a really quick lightning round. We do not need the countdown clock in the back. I just have a few statements that I'm going to pose for your reaction. Please express your agreement or disagreement in a sentence or less. So we're thinking 10 seconds, maybe.
That's impossible for me.
It's going to be hard. We can
I
do
agree.
it. You guys have been great keeping with the clock. So we're just going to do this very quickly. I'll have each of you rotate and who goes first, and I'll let you know who's going first. All right. First statement, and we're going to have Governor LePage go first. The state should provide financial support to municipalities to help with homelessness and the arrival of asylum seekers.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that if asylum seekers are here and Joe Biden's not going to force federal law on immigration and they're going to send us, instead of sending them to Martha's Vineyard, I want to put them to work.
Thank you. Governor Mills.
Yes, and we have provided, as I said, with the legislature, bipartisan budget that supports housing, emergency housing, including emergency housing for those legally here seeking asylum, to the tune of $23 million. And Greg Payne and others are working so hard to make sure that nobody stays out in the cold this winter. It is only appropriate that we help people who want to be here and expedite their work permits, as the 4 members of Congress and I have demanded that Congress do.
Thank you. Next statement, and we will start with Governor Mills. Counties or municipalities should have the right to establish some type of local option tax.
No. We don't need to. I've talked with many members of the county commissions and the municipalities and the mayors and expressed my views pretty bluntly over the last 3.5 years. I don't agree with a local sales tax.
I will say this. If we take our education system and we get the bricks and mortars under control, and we deal with our administrative cost, and we move it towards a county system, I would favor a county option tax. Other than that, because education is a major cost to property tax owners, and right now we have some schools, for instance, we have 2 Class A high schools. 2 Class A high schools back in the 70s. Now, the graduating class combined, they're 5 miles apart, combined this past year, 50 kids. We have 2 schools that graduated 50 kids. I think one school could have taken care of 50 kids, and the other one, we could have put it into housing.
Do I
Thank
get to
you.
respond or anything? Lightning
We're
rod.
going to hold responses. Governor LePage, we're going to start with you on the next statement. Cruise ships are a benefit to Maine's economy and should be allowed to come to Maine's ports.
Absolutely. Period.
Sure.
Governor Mills.
I think there are appropriate regulations on that, too, in terms of discharge and whatnot. We need to keep our communities and our waters safe, but yes, they should be welcome here. They're an important economic driver.
Thank you. And this final statement, this could be a pretty robust answer. Let's try to keep it down to 10 seconds, but I'm going to ask a pretty big question here. So you have both held the office of Governor of Maine, which is really interesting to do this debate with 2 individuals who have had the position of governor. And you both would like another term. What's the one thing you would do differently if elected? And I will start with Governor Mills.
In the future, do something differently?
Yes.
Well, I think we have to focus on our workforce issues. I want to do more that way, not necessarily different, but more to address housing, workforce, and education. I just got a property tax bill, my property tax bill last week, and I paid it, and it said, without the state's share of public education and without revenue sharing, your bill would have been 42% higher. I want to continue bringing down the property tax and bringing up our economic development measures, investing in Maine people.
Thank you.
First thing I would do is work to get our workforce participation from 58.8% back up to 65 or greater. I think we can't pay people to stay home, and as long as we do that, we're going to fail. Secondly, I agree schools are the major cost of property tax, and I think there's a lot that I should have done and could have done more had I understood the depth of the problem and the problem of having two parties that refuse to work together. We need to figure it out, and education, folks, is the future of our kids, and affordable education and quality education is an absolute must.
Thank you both. Let's move to closing statements. We will start with Governor Mills, and there's a minute on the clock.
Thank you. Listen, growing up in Farmington, Maine, in Western Maine, I learned the value of hard work. My parents both worked full-time while raising 5 kids. I had a paper route when I was young as 5 or 6 years old and waited tables as a teenager and as a college student to help pay my way through college. As the first woman district attorney in Maine and serving in Androscoggin County, I prosecuted major crimes like homicide and domestic abuse. As Attorney General, I fought anyone who tried to hurt Maine people. We've both navigated challenges in our hardest days, the people of Maine and I together, by collaboration. We've come out the other side, stronger and better and more resilient, because we've worked together to get things done. We made it through a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic with nation-leading results. We fully funded the schools for the first time in history with no gimmicks or fuzzy math. By working together with Republicans, Democrats, and independents, I raised the minimum teacher salary, delivered free community college, and so many other things. And workforce participation for the prime age group is up to more than 82% in Maine. People are working. I want to keep on that path to progress. With your help, I ask for your vote this November.
Thank you. Governor LePage.
November 8th, you have a choice to make. A prosecutor or a job creator and a businessman. Whether it's a Shawmut Dam or school curriculum, the question is whether Janet is covering up her record or does she lack the skills set to manage large organizations like the state of Maine. Maine faces challenging times. Our economy is broken. We are failing our kids with an extreme woke agenda, and our small businesses are under attack. Janet's only solution, throw more money at the problem. Remember this, too much money hides a lot of sins. Ask yourself, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Is your grocery bill lower than it was 4 years ago? Is your electricity bill lower than it was 4 years ago? Can Mainers afford to heat their homes this winter? Are more Mainers working in a growing economy than they were 4 years ago? My record as governor is clear. I have the skill set to navigate us through the troubled times. I spent a career doing it. It's time to move Maine forward, and I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Rebuttal?
Thank you both. Okay, absolute final question. Should your bid for governor be successful, do you promise to come back here and speak to our audience as governor of
Depends on
Maine?
the audience. Alone?
Alone as governor.
I've been here many times before. I will come back many times in the future, I'm sure.
Same here. In fact, invite me down and I'll go buy Deer and Oaks before I come here. Thank you.
Thank you both. A round of applause for the candidates, please.
Thank you.